So the Supreme Court ruling striking down those emergency tariffs the administration put in place, now getting some pushback from the president. The president announcing just a few moments ago that he will implement not a 10%, but a 15% global tariff on all countries around the world. Madeleine Rivera brings us that latest reaction now from world leaders, too. Hi, Maddie.
Good morning, or good afternoon, rather, Aisha. So a lot of world leaders have been looking at this Supreme Court ruling with caution, unsure of how it will affect the administration's deals and framework agreements. They're also not off the hook just yet because the president says he intends to keep tariffs for now. He'll just be using a different trade law. He'll be invoking Section 122 of the 1974 Trade Act to impose tariffs on a temporary basis. And like you said, Aisha, just this morning he made this announcement. He is raising the 10% worldwide tariff on countries to what he called the fully allowed and legally tested 15% level. The administration will also be conducting investigations using another authority that opens the door for tariffs on countries that engage in unfair trading practices. The president clearly defiant, despite the Supreme Court's 6-3 decision yesterday that he exceeded his power by imposing duties under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. He's been criticizing the justices who ruled against him and praising those who did side with the administration. The president also saying on Truth Social today, my new hero is United States Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh and, of course, Justices Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito. There is no doubt in anyone's mind that they want to make America great again. So President Trump has been able to quickly find a workaround for the tariffs. What's less unclear is the status of the roughly $175 billion in tariff revenue that are now subject to potential refunds. The court sent the issue back to the lower courts with the refunds running through trade courts and the customs claims process. It could be very messy and take a long time to do.
There is some precedent in the past in other wide-ranging tariff cases where the Court of International Trade, which is a district-level court in the United States, had a hand in being very specific about the how and the when of those kinds of things. So we'll have to see how the courts want to deal with it.
And regarding the trade deals the president has struck, the administration expects those agreements will hold. Aisha.
Okay, Maddie, thank you very much. For more on the impacts of this Supreme Court ruling on tariffs, let's bring in Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman. Senator, great to have you on this program. Great to see you.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Senator, I want to play a quick soundbite for you. This is the president talking about how he doesn't need congressional approval to issue any new tariffs, and then your colleague, Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar, responding and disagreeing with that.
I have the right to do tariffs, and I've always had the right to do tariffs, and it's all been approved by Congress, so there's no reason to do it. All we're doing is we're going through a little bit more complicated process.
Yes, he should work with Congress, but he also has to stop doing these things that are clearly illegal that then lead to complete chaos in the economy.
So, Senator, you have said before that this tariff trade war has actually worked out pretty well for the U.S. Bill Maher has said something similar too. We didn't go into a deep depression, that things actually were okay with the economy. So would you or any other Senate Democrat give the president congressional authority to issue tariffs if he were to come and ask for it?
Well, I mean, what I've said, that was in the context that yeah, you didn't crater the economy and you did not trash the stock market for there. But I have also said there's part of those tariffs that I'll never get. I don't understand the upside to go after our allies, whether it's Canada or Mexico or other nations in Europe. I don't understand that because they are allies. And I think he should work with Congress because I think, at least with me, you have an open mind. And if we can use those kinds of tariffs to go after China and isolate China, I absolutely would vote and would want to support those things.
Well, he is going to China in a couple of weeks now, and he has often said that tariffs give him a lot of leverage. So what do you think of these 15% tariffs that he just announced?
Well, I do agree. That's why those tariffs, does have some leverage. And I do think the president is entitled to have some of that kinds of leverage. But I use that kind of leverage against someone like China, not going after, our allies like Canada and other, because like Brazil, I mean, to me, that it seemed like it's just made coffee unnecessarily more expensive for things. So for me, if you can isolate and hold China accountable, I would absolutely support that and use the kinds of leverage for those tariffs in it.
Okay, I want to turn to this government shutdown that continues. Congress is headed back to the Hill this week. You've been critical of this partial shutdown because it impacts the Department of Homeland Security. I want to pull up a headline from the Associated Press this week in which they said the U.S. economic growth is weaker than thought in the fourth quarter with the government shutdown consumer pullback. And now we've got this massive sewage spill in the iconic Potomac River. FEMA has to eventually jump in. Democrats want FEMA's help, but they're not funding FEMA right now. So what is the Democrats' plan when they come back to Capitol Hill to reopen DHS?
Well, you know, regarding the headline that you referenced there, I quite literally on my social, I put that out. I used that, and I said that online. I said, you know, this is one of the reasons why I will always to shut our government down. I refuse to do that because that really clearly that damaged our economy now too. And I was one of only other two Democrats that refused constantly to shut our government down. And here we are now. We really, I was now the only Democrat to refuse that. And all the Democrats, we agree that we want to have some reforms on ICE, but this would have none of that involved in it. This shutdown was nothing more than people that are afraid of the base to just explain to them that shutting down the entire DHS will have no impact or make those kinds of reforms for ICE. And now we need to make sure that those resources are there. And I refuse to put the workers through now not getting paid for the second time in the last 2 or 3 months. America deserves more, and we should be able to count on keeping our government open. And now when you have a disaster like the sewage or a storm or anything, FEMA needs to always be ready. And now why I can't, it's just indefensible to shut down the DHS, especially because it's not going to accomplish kinds of goals and reform.
It's not impacting ICE. You're going to be attending the State of the Union on Tuesday. We'll see what Democrats decide to do about it. I find it interesting that the Democrats have landed on the Virginia governor, Abigail Spanberger, as their person that's going to respond to the president's speech on Tuesday. And the party is clearly trying to project a moderate point of view, that we are all about moderate voices. But isn't it so that the progressives are actually running the show here right now? They're raising the most amount of money. You've got progressives out in Illinois, 4 of them, that banded together on an anti-APAC message to try to replace some of these incumbents that were moderate just around the Chicago area. And you've even got progressives that are eyeing your seat right now. So isn't that more of what the party stands for right now and where it's going, more to the left?
Well, I mean, definitely, there's a big part of the Democratic Party that's afraid of the base. You know, I've been a kind of a Democrat to remind people that my values haven't changed. But if that's going to offend you, they're entitled to have their own views. But I'm always going to be the reasonable one. That I'm going to have, you know, the kinds of values like I refuse to shut our government down. Or now, if I agree with the president, for example, on striking the Iranian nuclear facilities. I actually the only Democrat to support that. And I also identified that the border was a disaster, you know, under the Biden administration. We need to make the appropriate changes to make that as well too. So, you know, I try to be a reasonable voice in really unreasonable times. And now that's where I'm at. And I do plan to go to the State of Union. And then I do hope all the other Democrats that choose to come, that we don't do the same kinds of things that happened at the last year. I mean, it was really undignified. And just the thing, no, I don't care who the president is. Don't yell and disrupt that. It's like you really should respect the office. You don't have to like the occupant, but you respect that. And that's, you know, we should be better than that. So for me, as a Democrat, you know, it's just calling balls and strikes. And I'm always going to pick country over party.
Well, on that note, just before I let you go, you know, you're talking about people who want to project that they're common sense Democrats. And one of them is a potential 2028 candidate, Governor Josh Shapiro, who sort of dodged earlier this year a question about potentially endorsing you if you decide to run for re-election. Do you expect to get an endorsement from the governor?
I really don't consider it, and I don't have an opinion on the governor or an endorsement for that. You know, I do know we appreciate our service.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we will wait to see what your announcement is when that time comes. The senator from Pennsylvania, John Fetterman, thank you so much for coming on. Great to see you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.